I already knew how it ended before I sat down. I knew it the moment Gloria smoothed her skirt, adjusted those pearl earrings, and folded her hands on the table like she was about to chair a board meeting instead of trying to take my son. She had practiced this. The posture, the quiet, the performance of a woman who deserved to be believed. The judge hadn't even looked up yet, and I sat there, 3 feet away from the woman who had spent 14 months building a case against me, and I felt nothing she was expecting me to feel. No trembling, no tears. Just the particular stillness of someone who already knows what's in the room that the other person hasn't found yet. Gloria had one question coming. One simple question from a man in a black robe who didn't know any of us, didn't care about the dinners or the holidays or whose name was on the birth certificate. He just had a file, and so did I. Before we go any further, what time is it where you are right now? Drop your time and your country in the comments. I want to know who's in this room with me. Atlanta in September has a particular quality of light that I have never been able to explain to people who didn't grow up there. It comes through the windows, sideways in the late afternoon amber and heavy, and it makes everything look more permanent than it is. Houses, marriages. The version of yourself you built for other people to approve of. I met Derek Calloway at a work conference in Buckhead in the fall of 2017. He was presenting a slide deck on the municipal infrastructure financing. And I was there representing my firm's urban development portfolio. He was confident in the way that men who have been told they are exceptional their whole lives tend to be not arrogant exactly, but settled. Occupying space without apology. I found it attractive then. I would come to find it exhausting later. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. It was a good 14 months. Weekend trips to Savannah, dinners at Pascal's, long Sunday mornings where neither of us had anywhere to be. He called when he said he would call. He showed up when he said he would show up. I was 30 years old, and I had watched enough of my friends marry men who treated reliability like a gift instead of a baseline. So I paid attention to the baseline. Derek cleared it consistently. What I did not fully account for was Gloria. She came with him the way certain weather systems come with certain cities, not always visible, but always present in the pressure. Derek was her only child, born late to a woman who had arranged her entire identity around the fact of him. Gloria Calloway was 61 years old, retired from 30 years in hospital administration. And she had opinions about everything from how grits should be seasoned to how a daughter-in-law should conduct herself at Sunday dinner. She delivered these opinions with the particular smile of a woman who had learned that softness was more effective than volume. She never liked me. I want to be precise about that because I've spent a long time making sure I was not imagining it. It was not that she was unkind, exactly. She was never unkind in a way you could point to clearly. It was more like standing in a room where the temperature had been turned down. 2 degrees, nothing dramatic, nothing you could report to anyone. Just a persistent, undeniable chill. The first Christmas, she gave me a devotional book about becoming a better wife. She handed it to me across the table with both hands, and a full smile the way you hand someone a gift you are genuinely pleased with. Derek was talking to his uncle and did not see. I said thank you. I put it in my bag. I never opened it. We got married in May of 2019. Small ceremony, Piedmont Park, 83 people. It was a beautiful day. I have photographs that prove it. In all of them, Gloria is positioned slightly closer to Derek than I am. And she is always looking at the camera like the day belongs to her. Our son was born in March of 2021. We had agreed on the name during my second trimester, Marcus Andre Calloway. I had wanted Andre after my grandfather, a man who had driven a bus route in southwest Atlanta for 31 years without missing a single scheduled shift. Steady, consistent. The kind of man I wanted my son to know he came from. Gloria arrived at the hospital 4 hours after Marcus was born. She held him for 11 minutes, I counted from the bed, because I was still sewn together and could not stand. And when she handed him back, she said quietly, almost to herself, "He looks just like Derek did. He looks just like my Derek Jr." Derek Jr. I looked at my husband. Derek was smiling at his mother, soft and unguarded, in the way he only ever was around her. He did not correct her. He did not say his name is Marcus. He just smiled. I filed that moment away. I did not make a scene. I was 24 hours post-surgery and holding a person I had just made, and I understood with a clarity that exhaustion sometimes brings that this was not a one-time slip. This was a declaration. Gloria was telling me, in the only language she ever used, exactly how she saw the order of things. Marcus grew. He was a good baby, slept in 4-hour stretches by week 6, laughed first at the ceiling fan, said mama at 9 months, and then immediately said da, and then spent 3 weeks saying nothing but da on a loop while I pretended not to notice. Derek was a present father in the early months. Bottles at 2 a.m. Saturday mornings at the park, a genuine delight in the smallness of Marcus's hands around his finger. That part was real. I want to be fair about what was real. What was also real, Gloria came over every Sunday. And then Sundays and Wednesdays. And then Sundays and Wednesdays, and sometimes Friday afternoons, arriving with food in containers she expected to be returned clean. She would take Marcus from whoever was holding him, without asking. Settle into the chair nearest the window, the good chair, the one with the ottoman, and hold him for the duration of her visit, while conducting a separate conversation with Derek about things that had nothing to do with me. I was 31 years old, working 44 hours a week nursing a child, and slowly becoming a guest in my own living room. Derek did not see it. Or he saw it and decided the cost of addressing it was higher than the cost of my discomfort. I have thought about which one it was for a long time. I'm still not certain it matters. What I know is this. By Marcus's first birthday, Gloria was scheduling his pediatric appointments without telling me. I found out because the reminder text went to Derek's phone, and he mentioned it over dinner like it was logistical, not extraordinary. Like it was normal for a grandmother to book a child's medical visits without the mother's knowledge. I put down my fork. I picked it back up. I said, "That won't happen again." Derek said, "She was just trying to help." I said, "I know." That night, I opened a note on my phone, and I typed the date and what had happened, and I saved it. I don't know why I did that exactly. Some part of me that had been paying attention longer than the rest of me had caught up with. The note was the first entry. There would be many more. The thing about a crack in a foundation is that it doesn't announce itself. You don't wake up one morning to a gap in the wall and a timestamp. You wake up to something slightly off a door that used to close flush, and now catches at the frame a window that rattles when it didn't used to rattle, a feeling in your feet when you walk across a certain room that tells you the floor has shifted just slightly, just enough. You notice it. You say nothing. You walk across that floor every day, and you file it somewhere in the back of your mind, under things I will address when I have the bandwidth. And then one day, you look up, and the whole east wall has a problem. And you have to be honest with yourself about how long you have known. The first thing I noticed was the Google Calendar. Derek and I shared a family calendar, standard marriage infrastructure. Nothing dramatic, color-coded by person, synced to both phones. Green for Derek, blue, for me yellow for Marcus's appointments. Gloria's visits were not on it because Gloria's visits were not planned. They simply occurred the way weather occurs, the way gravity occurs. But in October of 2021, I opened the calendar to check a dentist appointment, and I saw a new entry on a Saturday I thought we had kept clear. Derek's green, 11 a.m. Mom's, Marcus. Not going to Mom's with Marcus, not taking Marcus to see Gloria. Just Mom's. Marcus. A destination and a passenger. No conversation, no heads up, no version of events where I had been included in the planning and simply forgotten. I checked the timestamp on the entry. It had been created 4 days earlier on a Tuesday at 2:17 p.m. Derek had been at his office at 2:17 p.m. on Tuesday. He had sat at his desk and put his son's name on a calendar entry and not mentioned it over any of the 4 dinners we had shared since then. I did not bring it up immediately. I want to be honest about that. I told myself I was choosing my battles, which is a thing people say when they are actually choosing their silence, and there is a difference. I made note of it. I watched. The second thing I noticed was the car seat. Marcus had 2 1-base in my Volvo, 1-base in Derek's Audi. We had bought them together at Bye Bye Baby on a Saturday in January when I was 34 weeks pregnant, standing in an aisle under fluorescent lights, and Derek had read the installation instructions out loud while I sat in a display glider because my feet had stopped being feet and had become something else entirely. We had laughed about the instructions. It was a good afternoon. By Marcus's second winter, the car seat base in Derek's Audi had been moved to the rear passenger side, the side that faced Gloria's driveway. It had always been installed on the driver's side rear, the standard position, the logical position. Someone had reinstalled it. The new installation was competent, correct even, but it was different. And no one mentioned it. I asked Derek about it on a Thursday evening while Marcus was in the bath. He said, "Oh." Mom thought it was easier to get him in from that side. I stood in the bathroom doorway and looked at my husband. Marcus was splashing. The rubber duck was on the floor. "Gloria reinstalled our car seat," I said. "She just moved it. It's not a big deal." "She moved it without telling me." "Madison, I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm telling you what happened." He turned back to the bath. I picked up the rubber duck. I added it to the note on my phone. Date detailed Derek's exact words. I had learned by then to write down exact words, because exact words are the thing people contest later. Not the event, the words. The third thing was a Saturday in November. Derek had taken Marcus to Gloria's for what he described as a few hours. A few hours became 6. I texted at the 4-hour mark, no response. Called at the 5-hour mark, went to voicemail. When they came home at 6:40 p.m., Marcus was already in his pajamas. The ones with the small yellow trucks that I kept at our house. The ones that had not been in the bag Derek packed that morning. Gloria had a set of Marcus's pajamas at her house. I stood in the foyer, and I looked at my son in his truck pajamas, and I thought about how you do not buy a set of a child's pajamas for your house, unless you have planned for that child to sleep at your house. And I thought about how no one had discussed that plan with me. And I thought about how many other things might be at Gloria's house by now. How many drawers might have been quietly filled, how much of my son's life had been arranged in a place I had not been invited into. I bathed Marcus again that night, even though he didn't need it. I just needed to be the one doing it. Derek went to bed early. I sat at the kitchen table after Marcus was down, and I opened my phone and I looked at the note I'd been keeping since the pediatric appointment. There were 11 entries now. Dates, times, details, exact words. 11 moments that individually could be explained away. She was helping, he forgot to mention it. It's not a big deal, but that together formed something with a shape. Something with a direction. I had been in urban development long enough to know that you do not wait for a building to fall before you document the structural issues. You take photographs of the cracks. You write down the dates. You build a file. I named mine G. I added the pajamas. I added the car seat. I added the calendar entry from October, the pediatric appointment from Marcus's birthday month, the Christmas devotional from 2019 that I had never opened, but had kept still in the original wrapping in the back of my closet on a shelf I did not have to look at often. I did not know yet what I was building, but I knew I was building something, and I knew with the particular certainty that comes from 11 entries and a rubber duck on a bathroom floor that I was not imagining the direction this was going. The crack had been there for a long time. I had just finally stopped pretending I didn't feel it under my feet. I found out on a Tuesday. That detail matters to me, the Tuesdayness of it. Not a Friday when you can at least fall apart over a weekend, not a Sunday when the week hasn't started yet, and the wound hasn't had to perform. A Tuesday, October 14th, 10:47 in the morning, the kind of midweek mid-morning that exists purely for administrative tasks and low-stakes emails, and the second cup of coffee you make because the first one wasn't enough. The kind of morning that has no business being the morning your life reorganizes itself. I was at my desk at the firm's Midtown office. We were 3 weeks into a mixed-use development review for a site in West End, and I had a site plan spread across half my desk and a red pen in my hand, and approximately 40 minutes before a call with the city planning department. My assistant, Renee, had gone to get lunch. The office was thin. 2 other people in the open area, both with headphones in. The courier arrived at 10:44. He asked for Madison Calloway by full name. I raised my hand from across the room the way you do when you're not expecting anything, and therefore not afraid of anything. He crossed the floor and set a manila envelope on top of my site plan and asked me to sign a receipt, and I signed it. And he left, and I looked at the return address. Law Offices of Hendricks and Pruitt, Atlanta, GA. I did not know that firm. I turned the envelope over. My full legal name on the front, the firm's name and address on the back, and a small red sticker in the bottom left corner that said, "Legal documents time sensitive," in a font that was trying very hard to be calm about something that was not calm. I opened it at my desk. I read the first paragraph. I read it again. Gloria Ann Calloway, maternal grandmother of the minor child, Derek Marcus Calloway, Jr. Derek Marcus Calloway, Jr. She had used that name in a legal document, a name that was not on any birth certificate, not on any form I had ever signed, not on anything that existed anywhere in any official capacity. She had walked into a law office and given my son a name that was not his name and put it in a legal filing and had it delivered to my place of employment on a Tuesday morning in October. I set the papers down on the site plan. I picked up my red pen. I set it down again. Renee came back from lunch at 11:02. She stopped when she saw my face. She put her salad on her desk without saying anything, and then she said, "Do you need me to clear your afternoon?" I said, "Clear my afternoon." I read the full filing in the small conference room with the door closed. 14 pages. Gloria was petitioning for grandparent visitation rights with language broad enough to function as a custody challenge, alleging that I was emotionally unavailable, frequently absent from the marital home during evening hours, and unable to provide consistent maternal presence due to professional obligations. She had listed 3 witnesses. One was the family's pastor. One was Derek's cousin Vanessa, who I had met 4 times. One was Derek himself. Derek. His name was on the witness list of a petition filed against me. I sat with that for a long time. The conference room had a window that looked out over Peachtree Street, and I watched a city bus make its stop below. And I thought about my grandfather, driving his route for 31 years. And I thought about what he would have said if he were alive and sitting across from me right now. He would not have said anything dramatic. He was not a dramatic man. He would have looked at the papers and then looked at me and said, "So what are you going to do?" I called Derek at 11:34 a.m. He answered on the second ring. I said, "I'm looking at a legal filing from your mother's attorneys." Silence. 3 full seconds of silence, which is a long time when you are holding 14 pages of allegations against your character as a mother. Then, "Madison, I can explain. Are you a witness in this filing?" She asked me to. "Derek, are your name on this document as a witness against me?" Another pause. shorter this time. Yes. I looked out the conference room window. The bus had moved on. The stop was empty. Okay, I said. Madison, I have to go. I ended the call at 11:37 a.m. I added the timestamp to the note on my phone. Then I opened a browser on my laptop and I searched Family Law Attorney, Atlanta, Georgia Custody Grandparent Rights, and I read for 40 minutes until I found the name Patricia Osei listed on 3 different forums as the attorney you called when the situation was serious and you needed someone who did not lose. I called her office at 12:19 p.m. Her paralegal picked up. I said, "My mother-in-law has filed a grandparent petition with language that functions as a custody challenge. My husband is listed as a witness for her side. I need an appointment as soon as possible." The paralegal said, "Can you come in Thursday at 8 a.m.? I said, "I'll be there at 7:45. I went back to my desk. I put the site plan in my portfolio case. I uncapped the red pen and I wrote at the top of my legal pad, in the steady block letters I used when I needed my handwriting to mean something. 2022 G. Then I wrote the date. Then I wrote Derek's name. Then I wrote the name they had put on that document, Derek Marcus Calloway, Jr. And I drew a single line through it. Not angry, precise. The way you cross out an error on a legal document. With intention, Renee knocked on the conference room door at 1:15. She said, "Do you want me to order you something?" I said, "I'm fine." She looked at me the way women look at each other when they know you are not fine, but they also know you do not need them to say so. She nodded once and closed the door. I sat in that conference room until 2:30. By the time I left, I had written 4 pages of notes called Patricia Osei's office, a second time to confirm Thursday, and made a list of every document I needed to pull before the week was out. The site plan review could wait. My son could not. I did not call Gloria. I want to be clear about that because people always ask, did you try to talk to her? Did you reach out? Did you attempt to resolve it privately before it became what it became? And the answer is no, I did not call Gloria. I did not text her. I did not show up at her house on Lyndhurst Drive with my voice steady and my hands open and give her an opportunity to perform remorse in a way that would cost her nothing and buy her time. I had 14 pages that told me exactly who I was dealing with. You do not negotiate with a filed document. You respond to it. Patricia Osei's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Center Avenue. I arrived at 7:43 a.m. on Thursday and sat in the waiting area and drank the coffee her assistant offered me and looked out at the city coming awake below. Atlanta in the early morning has a different quality than Atlanta in the afternoon. Cooler, less performed the light, still deciding what it wants to be. Patricia came out at 8:01. She was 53 years old, medium height, natural hair cut close. Reading glasses pushed up on her head, wearing a charcoal suit that had not been bought to impress anyone. She shook my hand and looked at me directly and said, "Let's go over what you have." I had brought a folder. The folder contained a printed copy of Gloria's filing my phone. With the Note app open 11 entries, now 14, the pediatric appointment documentation I had pulled from Marcus's patient portal, and a photograph I had taken of the car seat in Derek's Audi the morning after Derek told me Gloria had moved it. I had photographed it without knowing why, the same way I had started the note, without knowing why. Some part of me had been a better lawyer than I knew. Patricia read through the filing first. She did not react while she read. When she finished, she set it on the desk and said, "Your husband is a witness." "Yes." "Have you spoken to him since you received this?" "Briefly. He confirmed his name was on it." "And since then?" "We've been in the same house. We've discussed Marcus's schedule. We haven't discussed this." She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "That's a reasonable choice." I thought so. She asked me to walk her through the note on my phone. I read each entry aloud, date detail, exact words. She stopped me twice to ask clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You have been documenting this for how long?" 14 months. "And you started before any legal action was filed?" "Yes, after the pediatric appointment." She wrote something on her legal pad. I could not read it from where I sat. Then she said, "The filing is aggressive, but it has structural problems. The language around your professional obligations as evidence of neglect is thin. Courts in Georgia have been consistent about not penalizing employed mothers. The emotional unavailability claim needs witnesses with standing. The pastor and the cousin are character witnesses at best." She paused. "The husband is the variable." "I know. Do you have any sense of how far he'll go?" I thought about 3 seconds of silence on a phone call. I thought about a car seat moved to face a driveway. I thought about a Sunday dinner in 2019 when I watched Derek refill his mother's water glass 3 times before he refilled mine, and I had decided it was nothing. "He'll go as far as she needs him to," I said, "and then he'll feel terrible about it." Patricia nodded like that was a complete answer, which it was. We met for 90 minutes. When I left, I had a legal strategy, a document request list, and one instruction from Patricia that I wrote at the bottom of my notepad and circled twice. Do not change your routine. Do not react publicly. Let her build her case. We'll dismantle it at the source. I drove back to the office. I picked Marcus up from daycare at 5:30, the same time I always picked him up. I made dinner pasta, the kind with the small shells Marcus liked because he could fit them on his fingertip one at a time. Derek came home at 6:45. We ate together. Marcus put a shell on each finger of his left hand and held them up for Derek to see. And Derek laughed genuinely the way he laughed when it was just the 3 of us, and he forgot to be whatever else he was trying to be. I watched him laugh. I passed him the bread. I did not say anything about the filing. I did not say anything about Patricia Osei or the 14th floor, or the instruction I had circled twice on my notepad. I said, "Marcus figured out the finger trick today at lunch." Derek said, "Did he?" Marcus said, "Dada, look," and held up his hand again, and Derek looked, and I watched my husband look at our son, and I felt something that was not quite grief and not quite anger, and was mostly just the specific exhaustion of loving people who are in the process of failing you. After Marcus was in bed, I opened the file on my laptop. I had named it G, but now I made a subfolder and labeled it Legal. And inside that I began the document request Patricia had outlined. Marcus's medical records from his patient portal, full history, every appointment, every provider, every note. My employment records, 3 years of performance reviews, all satisfactory or above. My schedule reconstructed from calendar entries and email timestamps, demonstrating my presence for school pickups, pediatric visits, sick days, holidays. The note from my phone exported and dated. I also pulled something Patricia had not asked for yet, but that I had been thinking about since I left her office. When I was pregnant with Marcus Derek, and I Wairan, had updated our estate documents. Will healthcare directives and a revocable living trust that included provisions for Marcus's care and education. The trust had been drafted by an attorney named Clifton Webb, whose office was in Decatur. And the primary trustee in the event of my incapacitation or death was not Derek. Derek had agreed to this without fully understanding it, the way Derek agreed to most administrative things, nodding in Clifton's conference room while his phone buzzed in his pocket. The primary trustee was my mother. The assets in the trust were mine. Built before the marriage, maintained separately, documented to the decimal. Derek knew they existed. He did not know the full scope. Gloria certainly did not know. I opened the trust document. I read through it. Everything was exactly as Clifton had drafted it. I saved it to the legal subfolder. Then I closed the laptop and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of a house where my son was asleep. And my husband was watching television in the next room. And somewhere across the city, a woman was building a case to take Marcus from me. And I felt for the first time since the manila envelope landed on my site plan, something that was not dread. It was closer to readiness. I had been keeping this file for 14 months without knowing what it was for. Now, I knew what it was for. I turned off the kitchen light and went to check on Marcus. He was on his back arms out the way he always slept open, trusting taking up exactly as much space as he needed. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I went to bed. I had work to do in the morning. The campaign started on a Sunday. That is the only word for what Gloria did in the 8 weeks between filing her petition and our first court date campaign. It was organized. It had messaging. It had outreach. It had, I would come to understand, been in preparation for longer than the filing itself, which meant that the filing was not the beginning of something. It was the announcement of something that had already been built. The first call came from Pastor Wendell Hayes of Greater Cornerstone Baptist, the church Derek had grown up in, and that we attended approximately 6 times a year, Easter, Christmas, Mother's Day, the occasional Sunday, when Derek felt the particular guilt that lapsed churchgoers carry like a low-grade fever. Pastor Hayes was 67 years old, a careful man, a man who chose his words the way jewelers choose settings. He called me on a Sunday afternoon while Marcus was napping and Derek was watching football and I was on the back porch with a cup of tea going over a zoning memo. He said, "Sister Calloway, I hope I'm not interrupting." I said, "Not at all, Pastor." He said he was calling because he cared about our family. He said he had known Derek since Derek was 7 years old, had watched him grow into a man, had performed our wedding ceremony, and meant every word of it. He said he had also known Gloria for 30 years, and that she was a woman of deep faith and genuine love for her grandson. Then he said, "I wonder if you might consider whether there's a way to resolve this that keeps the family intact. Sister Gloria has some concerns that I think, if you heard them directly." I said, "Pastor Hayes, with respect, my mother-in-law filed a legal petition. She retained attorneys. She named my husband as a witness against me. There is a court date. This is no longer a family matter I can resolve over coffee." A pause. Then, "I understand. She's asked me to share that she's worried about Marcus, about his stability." I looked out at the backyard. Marcus's plastic slide was in the corner slightly crooked from where he'd crashed into the fence the week before. His red bucket was on the bottom step. I said, "I appreciate you calling, Pastor. I truly do. But I need you to understand something clearly. I am Marcus's mother. I have been present for every pediatric appointment, every sick night, every first. There is documentation for all of it. Whatever concerns Sister Gloria has shared with you, I would encourage you to consider the source and the timing." Another pause. Longer. He said, "I'll be praying for your family." I said, "Thank you." I ended the call and wrote the date and time and his exact words in the note on my phone. Then I added, "Gloria is working the church network. This is coordinated." I told Patricia about the call the next morning. She said, "Expect it. Don't engage with intermediaries. Anyone who calls on Gloria's behalf, family, church, mutual friends, you're polite, you're brief, you give them nothing." She paused. "They will report back to her. Make sure there is nothing to report." Over the next 4 weeks, 5 more people called. Derek's cousin Vanessa, already listed as a witness, called on a Wednesday evening to say she hoped we could keep this from getting ugly. I thanked her for calling. I said nothing else. A woman named Barbara from the church's women's ministry called to tell me she had been praying for me and that sometimes our pride can keep us from accepting help. I thanked her for the prayer. I said nothing else. Derek's Uncle Raymond called to tell me that Gloria was just a grandmother who loves her grandson, and that I needed to think about what kind of example this sets for Marcus. I thanked him for his perspective. I said nothing else. Each call was the same, underneath the different words. A probe dressed as concern, a piece of intelligence gathering, wearing the costume of community. Gloria wanted to know if I was rattled. She wanted to know if I would say something she could use. She wanted to know if the pressure was working. I gave her nothing. But the calls told me something Patricia had not been able to confirm yet, from the documents alone. Gloria had been talking about me in these circles for a long time. The pastor had not been recruited in the weeks after the filing. He had been primed over months, maybe longer. Barbara from the women's ministry had not formed an opinion about my pride from a single conversation. These people had a narrative about me that had been constructed carefully and consistently and delivered in the language of worry, which is the most effective language for making accusations sound like love. I thought about every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every moment I had sat in my own living room and felt 2 degrees colder than the room. She had been building this case before I knew there was a case. The escalation came in week 5. Derek came home on a Thursday with the specific energy of a man who has been having a conversation in his head for hours and has finally decided to have it out loud. He put his bag down, poured a glass of water, and stood at the kitchen counter while I finished Marcus's dinner plate. He said, "My mother thinks we should consider a temporary arrangement." I put the plate down. What kind of arrangement? Just while the case is pending. Let Marcus spend some weeknights at her place, so the court can see she has a relationship with him. I turned around. Derek was looking at his water glass. "Derek, look at me." He looked up. "Your mother filed a legal petition to take our son. She named you as a witness against me. And you are standing in our kitchen asking me to voluntarily send Marcus to her house more often so that her legal case looks stronger. That is exactly what that is." He set the glass down. "She's his grandmother, Madison. She loves him. I know she loves him. That is not what is on trial." I picked the plate back up. "Marcus is sleeping in his bed tonight and every night until a judge tells me otherwise. And no judge is going to tell me otherwise." Derek left the kitchen. I heard him on the phone 20 minutes later, voice low in the bedroom with the door closed. He was on the phone for 31 minutes. I did not need to hear the conversation to know who he was talking to. I added it to the note. Then Patricia called the following Monday with something that changed the shape of everything. She said, "I've been doing background research on Gloria Calloway. Standard procedure in grandparent rights cases, we look at the petitioner's history." A pause. "Madison, I need you to listen carefully to what I found." I sat down at my kitchen table. "I'm listening." In 1987, Gloria Ann Calloway, then Gloria Ann Simmons, was the subject of a termination of parental rights proceeding in Chatham County, Savannah. I heard the words. I processed them one at a time. She had a child before Derek. A daughter. The proceedings were initiated by the state. The termination was granted. The record is sealed, but the index entry is public case number CV 10987-04412. Patricia's voice was steady, measured. "Derek does not know. As far as I can determine, no one in the current family circle knows. Gloria has kept this sealed for 38 years. I sat at my kitchen table, and I looked at Marcus's red cup on the counter, the one with the dinosaur on it, the one he asked for by name every morning. "She walked into a courtroom," I said slowly, to petition for custody of my son. Yes. With this in her history? Yes. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, Patricia, what does a judge ask a petitioner in a grandparent custody case? Patricia said, standard procedure includes a direct examination of the petitioner's fitness and history. So a judge would ask. A judge would ask. I looked at the dinosaur cup. Okay, I said. Let's go to court. Patricia sent me the index entry on a Tuesday evening at 9:14 p.m. It was 3 lines. A case number, a date, a county, and a petitioner name, Gloria Ann Simmons, which was the name she had carried before she married Harold Calloway in 1983, and became the woman Derek knew as his mother, the woman the church knew as Sister Gloria, the woman who had walked into Hendricks and Pruitt's office and paid a retainer to take my son. 3 lines that had existed in a public index for 38 years, visible to anyone who knew to look invisible to everyone who didn't. CV 1987-04412. Chatham County Superior Court. Termination of parental rights. I read it 4 times. Then I called Patricia back even though it was past 9, and she answered on the second ring, which told me she'd been expecting me to call. I said, how did you find it? She said, I run full background on every petitioner in a custody-adjacent case. Court indices, property records, civil filings, name variations, including maiden names. Most of the time, it produces nothing useful. Occasionally, it produces something like this. Can we get the full record? It's sealed. The index entry is public, the contents are not. In Georgia, TPR records involving minors are sealed at the time of the proceeding and remain sealed unless a court orders otherwise. She paused. But we don't need the full record. The index entry is enough. It establishes that a termination of parental rights proceeding occurred, was initiated by the state, and was granted. The contents would give us the specific grounds. The index entry gives us the fact. And the fact is enough. The fact is enough for what we need it for. What we needed it for was a single moment in a courtroom. Patricia had explained it to me in the kind of precise, unhurried language she used when she wanted to make sure I understood not just the strategy, but the architecture beneath it. In Georgia, when a grandparent petitions for visitation or custody rights, the court evaluates the grandparent's fitness as part of the proceeding. That evaluation includes direct examination. Gloria would be on the stand. She would be under oath. And under oath, in front of a Fulton County judge, she would be asked about her history with children. She would have to answer. Whatever answer she gave, we had CV 1987-04412 to hold against it. I asked Patricia what she thought the grounds had been. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, the proceeding was initiated by the state, not by a private party. State-initiated TPR proceedings in Georgia in that era were typically grounded in abandonment, abuse, neglect, or incapacity. The fact that it was granted suggests the grounds were substantiated. Another pause. I want to be careful about speculating beyond the record. I understand. What I will say is this. Whatever happened in Savannah in 1987, Gloria has spent 38 years making sure no one in her current life knew about it. That kind of sustained concealment takes effort. It takes intention. And it tells you something about how she understands the weight of what that record contains. I sat with that. A daughter. Somewhere. 38 years old now, or close to it. A woman who existed in a sealed file in Chatham County, and in whatever life she had built after 1987, entirely separate from the family Derek had grown up in, entirely unknown to the church and the cousins and the pastor who had called me on a Sunday afternoon to suggest I was the problem. I did not know her name. The index entry did not include the child's name, But I thought about her briefly, the way you think about a room in a house you've never entered. You know it exists. You can feel its gravity. You cannot see inside. Then I thought about Marcus asleep down the hall, and I set that room aside. The following week, Patricia filed our response to Gloria's petition. I did not read the full document before she filed it. Patricia had explained that in contested family proceedings, the less the opposing party could prepare against the response, the better. What I knew was that our response included the documentation from the note on my phone, now formally organized and dated. It included Marcus's medical records demonstrating my consistent presence at every appointment. It included my employment records, 3 years of performance evaluations, documentation of every school pickup and sick day. It included a declaration from Marcus's pediatrician doctor, Anita Forsyth, who had agreed to provide a statement confirming that Marcus presented as a well-attached, consistently cared-for child whose primary caregiver interactions were healthy and appropriate. It also included, as a single exhibit appended without comment, a copy of the public index entry for CV 1987-04-412. Patricia had attached it without explanation. No argument, no annotation. Just the 3 lines copied exactly appended to the back of our response as Exhibit H. She had told me, let them find it themselves. The moment Hendricks and Pruitt opens that response and gets to Exhibit H, the entire dynamic of this case changes. Gloria will know we have it. Her attorneys will know we have it. And they will spend the next 72 hours making decisions in a panic that they would otherwise have made carefully. She was right. On the 3rd day after we filed, Hendricks and Pruitt submitted a motion to delay the hearing by 60 days, citing scheduling conflicts. Patricia opposed it. The motion was denied. On the 5th day, Derek called me from his office at 2:30 in the afternoon. I was in a site review meeting, and I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 3:15. I stepped out of the conference room. He said, "Did you know about this before you filed it?" I said, "About what specifically?" A pause. He knew I knew. We both knew I knew. "My mother had another child," he said. His voice was different than I had heard it before, not angry, not defensive. Stripped of something. The particular sound of a person standing in a story they thought they knew, and finding a room they did not know existed. She had a daughter, before me, and the state they took her. I stood in the hallway outside the conference room. Someone walked past me with a coffee cup. The building's HVAC system hummed. "I found out through our legal process," I said. "I'm sorry you're learning this way." "She never—" He stopped, started again. 35 years. She never said anything." "I know. Madison." His voice cracked on the 2nd syllable, just slightly. "Did she know you knew when she filed?" "No." A long silence. Then, "She had no idea what she was walking into." "No," I said. "She didn't." I heard him breathe. In the background of his office, I could hear the faint sound of city traffic through a window somewhere. Atlanta going about its afternoon. He said, "I don't know what to do with this." I said, "I know." And I meant it. Whatever else, Derek was witness on a legal filing man who had stood in our kitchen and asked me to send our son to his mother's house more often. He was also a person who had just been handed a version of his family's history that rewrote things he could not unrewrite. I was not his enemy. I had never been his enemy. I had been the person standing between him and the thing he had been trained his whole life not to see. I went back into my meeting. That evening, I picked Marcus up at 5:30. He had learned to pump his legs on the swing at daycare, and he demonstrated this for me in the parking lot, using an invisible swing legs, pumping arms, gripping air face, entirely serious with the effort of showing me something he was proud of. I watched him pump his invisible swing. I thought about a courtroom 2 weeks away. I thought about a judge with a file, I thought about 3 lines in a public index that had waited 38 years to matter. They were about to matter. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 4:47 a.m. without an alarm. Marcus was still asleep. The house was the specific quiet of a place where someone small is breathing steadily in the next room. Not empty quiet, inhabited quiet, the kind that has weight and warmth to it. I lay in the dark for 11 minutes, and then I got up and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and did not look at my phone. I had prepared everything I could prepare. The documents were organized. Patricia had walked me through every scenario we could anticipate. I knew what Gloria's attorneys would argue, and I knew what our response to each argument was, and I knew with the particular steadiness that comes from having done the work completely that there was nothing left to do at 4:58 in the morning except be still. I drank my coffee. I checked on Marcus at 5:30, still asleep, arms out, taking up his space. I stood in the doorway for 30 seconds, and then I went to get dressed. I wore the charcoal wrap dress I wore to client presentations, not performative, not trying to signal anything except competence and composure. Low heels. My grandmother's small gold earrings, the ones she had worn every day of her adult life until she couldn't anymore. I had not worn them in 3 years. I put them on that morning without deciding to reach into the back of my jewelry box and found them by feel in the dark and put them on. And when I looked in the mirror, I understood why. I needed her in the room with me. My mother arrived at 6:15 to stay with Marcus. She came in quietly, set her bag down, looked at me for a long moment, and then pulled me into a hug that lasted long enough to mean something. She did not say anything reassuring. She was not that kind of mother. She held on, and then she let go, and she said, "Go." I met Patricia in the lobby of Fulton County Superior Court at 8:20 a.m. She was already there, standing near the elevators in her charcoal suit, with her reading glasses pushed up, West City, and a leather portfolio under her arm. She looked at me and said, "You ready?" It was not a question. "Yes," I said. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, which is always the way with the rooms where important things happen. You build them up in your mind to match the weight of what will occur inside them, and then you walk in and find fluorescent lighting and wooden benches, worn smooth by decades of people waiting for their lives to be decided. The room smelled of old paper and someone's coffee and a cleaning product with an artificial lemon scent. 4 long fluorescent tubes overhead, one of them flickering slightly at the far end. Gloria and her attorneys were already seated at the petitioner's table when we entered. I had not seen her since before the filing. 11 weeks. She was wearing a navy suit I recognized from Easter 3 years ago, and her pearls always the pearls, and her hair in the low chignon she wore when she wanted to be taken seriously. Her posture was extraordinary. The posture of a woman who had decided somewhere between her front door and this courtroom that the performance of certainty was the same as certainty itself. She did not look at me when I walked in. Derek was in the gallery 2nd row, wearing his gray suit, the one he wore to funerals and depositions. He looked at me when I entered. I looked back. We held that for a moment, not hostile. Not warm, just 2 people who had shared a life and were now on opposite sides of a wooden railing, which is not a metaphor, but also not a metaphor. Then I turned and took my seat beside Patricia. Hendricks and Pruitt had 2 attorneys at the petitioner's table, a senior partner named Gerald Pruitt, who was 60 and silver-haired, and had the practiced authority of a man who had been in these rooms many times, and a younger associate whose name I never learned, and who spent the entire proceeding taking notes with the focused intensity of someone who understood they were watching something go wrong. Judge Clarence Abernathy entered at 9:02. He was 64 years old, compact, unhurried, with the particular energy of a person who has been doing the same important job for a long time and has stopped being impressed by the performance aspects of it. He sat. He opened his file. He read for 90 seconds in complete silence while everyone in the room waited. Then he said, "We're here on the matter of Calloway versus Calloway petition for grandparent visitation with custody language case number." And he read the number, and I wrote it on my notepad, the way my grandfather would have written down a route number, steady and certain, because writing things down was how I stayed inside my own body when the world was asking me to leave it. Gerald Pruitt opened for the petitioner. He was good. I want to be fair about that. He had a coherent argument, a sympathetic framing a grandmother who loved her grandson and feared for his stability in a household where conflict had fractured the family unit. He used the word stability 6 times in his opening. He used the word concern 8 times. He made Gloria sound like a woman who had been left with no choice but to turn to the courts because the mother of her grandchild had closed every other door. He did not mention Savannah. He did not mention 1987. He did not mention CV 1000 987 04412. Patricia's opening was 4 minutes long. She established my employment record, my presence in Marcus's life, the documented history of consistent care, and the absence of any finding by any authority, medical, educational, governmental, of any deficiency in my parenting. She said, "The petitioner bears the burden of demonstrating that this court's intervention serves the child's best interests. The evidence will show that the child is thriving. The evidence will show that the only instability in this child's life has been manufactured by the petitioner herself." She paused. "We will also present information about the petitioner's history that the court will find directly relevant to its evaluation of her fitness to seek custodial authority over any child." She sat down. I watched Gerald Pruitt write something on his legal pad. His associate leaned over and said something close to his ear. Neither of them looked at Gloria. Gloria straightened her pearls. The judge hadn't even looked up yet. He called Gloria to the stand at 10:14. She walked to the witness box with the steady, deliberate pace of a woman who had prepared for this moment. She sat. She smoothed her skirt. She adjusted those pearl earrings. She folded her hands on the railing the way she had folded them at every Sunday dinner, at every holiday table, in every room she had ever decided to own. Gerald Pruitt walked her through her direct examination. She was composed, articulate, genuinely convincing in her love for Marcus. I will not deny that. Whatever else she was, her feeling for that child was real. I had always known that. The problem was never whether she loved him. The problem was what she believed that love entitled her to. Then Patricia stood for cross-examination. She asked 6 questions. The first 5 were procedural, establishing timeline, establishing Gloria's knowledge of various events, establishing the record of communication between Gloria and myself. Standard, careful. Tightening the frame around the 6th question the way you tighten a frame before you hang something heavy on it. Then Patricia said, "Mrs. Calloway, have you ever been a party to a child welfare proceeding in the state of Georgia?" The room shifted. It was not a dramatic shift. Nothing fell. No one gasped. It was a barometric shift, a change in pressure so precise and localized that only the people at the front of the room felt it immediately. Gerald Pruitt went very still. His associate's pen stopped moving. Derek, in the second row, leaned forward slightly. Gloria's hands, still folded on the railing, tightened. Just slightly, just enough. She said, "I'm not sure what you mean." Patricia said, "I'll be more specific. In 1987, in Chatham County, Georgia, were you a respondent in a termination of parental rights, proceeding under case number CV 1000 987 04412? The silence that followed was the kind that has a texture. Gloria looked at Gerald Pruitt. Pruitt looked at the table. Judge Abernathy looked up from his file for the first time. He looked at Gloria. His expression did not change. He had been in these rooms for a long time. He had heard silences with this texture before. He let it sit for 4 full seconds, I counted. And then he said in the measured, unhurried voice of a man who did not need to raise it to be heard in every corner of the room. "Ma'am, have you ever had parental rights terminated by this state before?" Gloria opened her mouth, closed it. The pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light, and in the second row, I heard Derek make a sound that was not quite a word, something that started in the chest and didn't finish in the throat. The sound of a story a person has told themselves their whole life, arriving at the sentence it could never survive. Gloria said, "That was a long time ago." Not a denial, not a clarification, not a legal objection or a request to confer with counsel. 4 words that were the shape of a confession, dressed in the clothing of context. That was a long time ago. As if time were the variable the court was evaluating. As if 38 years of silence were the same thing as 38 years of resolution. Judge Abernathy did not move. He said, "Ma'am, I need a yes or no answer to the question. Have you ever had parental rights terminated by this state?" Gloria looked at Gerald Pruitt one more time. Pruitt was looking at the table. His associate had put down her pen. There was nothing written on a legal pad that was going to help with this. They both knew it, and the knowing of it had made them very still in the way that people go still when they understand that the architecture they built their argument on has just been shown to have no foundation. Gloria turned back to the judge. She said, "Yes." One word, the quietest word in the room. The word that had been sealed in a Chatham County courthouse for 38 years and had traveled here this morning in 3 lines of a public index entry tucked into the back of a legal response as Exhibit H. And it landed now in Courtroom 4B of Fulton County Superior Court with the specific weight of something that has been held back for a very long time. Judge Abernathy made a note. Gerald Pruitt stood. "Your Honor, the petitioner would like to request a brief recess to—" "I'll hear the rest of cross-examination first," the judge said. He did not look up from his notes. "You may continue, Miss Osei." Patricia said, "Thank you, Your Honor." She looked at Gloria. Mrs. Calloway, were the parental rights terminated by voluntary relinquishment or by court order following a state-initiated proceeding? Gloria's jaw tightened. The tendons in her neck visible above the pearl necklace pulled slightly taut. She was still composed, I will give her that. She was still technically composed, still upright, still folded, but something underneath the composition had given way the way a wall stays standing for a moment after the foundation underneath it fails. She said, "Court order." Patricia said, "And the grounds cited in that court order, were they related to neglect, abandonment, or abuse?" Pruitt was on his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. The record is sealed. The witness cannot be compelled to testify to sealed record contents." Judge Abernathy said, "Sustained as to the specific contents of the sealed record." He looked at Patricia. "Counsel, you may ask the witness about her general recollection of the circumstances without requiring her to disclose sealed record specifics." Patricia nodded. "Mrs. Calloway, without reference to any sealed document in your own recollection, were the grounds for that termination related in any way to your conduct as a parent?" The fluorescent light at the far end of the room flickered. Gloria said, "It was a complicated time." The judge looked at her. "That is not an answer to the question." A pause, the kind that takes up space. Gloria said, "Yes, they were related to my conduct." Patricia said, "Thank you. No further questions." She sat down beside me, and she did not look at me, and I did not look at her. We both looked forward. That was the right thing to do in that moment, forward, steady, faces neutral, because this was not a moment for satisfaction to be visible. Satisfaction visible in a courtroom is a provocation, and we had not come here to provoke. We had come here to win, which is a different thing entirely. Pruitt requested his recess. This time the judge granted it 15 minutes. We stood. I did not look at Gloria as she stepped down from the witness box. I heard her heels on the floor measured and slow, and I heard the low, urgent voice of Gerald Pruitt speaking close to her as they moved toward the side of the room. And I heard one phrase cut through the low register clearly because Pruitt did not modulate it the way he intended to. "Why didn't you tell us?" And then the door to the hallway opened and closed, and they were gone. Patricia touched my arm once briefly and said, "Good." Just that. Just the one word. Then she opened her portfolio and began writing. I turned and looked at the gallery for the first time since we'd entered. Derek was sitting in the second row, with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. He was not crying. I want to be precise about that. I looked at him carefully, and he was not crying. He was doing something quieter than crying something that did not have a clean name. He was a man sitting inside the collapse of a story he had been given at birth. A story about his mother, about his family, about the version of the past that had been handed to him, and that he had carried without questioning, because questioning it had never been presented as an option. I watched him for a moment. Then I turned back around. The recess lasted 22 minutes. When Gloria and Pruitt returned, something had changed in Gloria's posture, not broken, not defeated, but recalibrated. The performance of certainty that had walked into this courtroom at 9:02 had been replaced by something more carefully managed, more deliberate. She sat down, and she did not look at me, and she did not straighten her pearls. That was how I knew. Gloria always straightened her pearls. Pruitt stood when the judge returned and said, "Your Honor, in light of the testimony this morning, the petitioner would like to request a continuance to allow time to—" Judge Abernathy said, "I'm going to stop you there, counsel." He opened his file. He read for a moment. He said, "I've reviewed the petition, the response, the documentation submitted by the respondent, and the testimony provided this morning. The court's role in a grandparent visitation petition is to evaluate whether the relief requested serves the best interests of the minor child. That evaluation requires the court to assess, among other things, the fitness and history of the petitioner." He looked at Gloria. "Mrs. Calloway, this court does not make character judgments about events that occurred decades ago. People change. Circumstances change. Courts recognize that." He paused, however. This court has serious concerns about a petitioner who sought custodial authority over a minor child while concealing a prior termination of parental rights from this court and from opposing counsel. That concealment speaks directly to the petitioner's candor, and candor is foundational to any proceeding in which this court is asked to make a determination about a child's welfare. He closed the file. The petition is denied. 3 words, spoken at 11:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in November in a small courtroom on the 4th floor of Fulton County Superior Court under 4 fluorescent lights and the faint smell of artificial lemon. Gloria did not react visibly. She sat very still. Pruitt wrote something on his legal pad. His associate began packing her bag with the quiet efficiency of someone who has already moved on to the next thing. I heard a sound from the second row. Derek's pen had dropped to the floor of the gallery. It rolled under the bench in front of him. He reached for it, and then stopped reaching, and just let it go. It lay on the floor between the benches, and nobody picked it up, and the room began the slow, procedural motion of concluding itself. Papers shuffling, chairs moving, the judge rising. The bailiff announcing, and through all of it, that pen lay on the floor where it had fallen, and nobody picked it up. Patricia gathered her portfolio. She said quietly, without fanfare, "We're done here." We walked out of courtroom 4B at 11:52 a.m. In the hallway, waiting for the elevator, Patricia said, "Go be with your son." I said, "I will." The elevator came. The doors opened. I stepped in and turned around, and in the last moment before the doors closed, I saw Gloria in the hallway outside the courtroom, standing with her back to me. Very still, her attorneys on either side of her, her hand raised to her neck where the pearls were. She was straightening them. One last time, in an empty hallway, with no one watching. Except me. The doors closed. The first thing I did when I got to my car was sit. Not call anyone, not text, not open my phone and begin the process of translating what had just happened into language suitable for other people's consumption. I sat in the parking structure on the 3rd level with my hands in my lap and the engine off. And I looked at the concrete wall in front of me, and I let the last 3 hours settle into my body the way water settles into ground, slowly finding every level, filling every space. It took about 4 minutes. Then I called my mother. She picked up before the first ring finished. I could hear Marcus in the background, some television program with a song in it, the kind of song designed to lodge permanently in the adult brain while the child has already forgotten it. I said, "It's done." She said, "Tell me." I told her. Not the legal details, not the procedural architecture, just the essential thing, the judge's 3 words, the pen on the floor, the hallway. She listened without interrupting, which was her particular form of love. The full, unbroken attention of a woman who understood that some things needed to be said completely before they could be received. When I finished, she said, "Your grandfather would have been very proud of you." I looked at the concrete wall. I said, "I know." She said, "Come home." I picked Marcus up from my mother's house at 1:30 in the afternoon. He was in the backyard with a popsicle grape, which meant purple on his chin and both hands, and he ran toward me when I came through the gate with the particular full-body commitment of a 2-year-old who has not yet learned to temper his joy for an audience. I caught him and held him, and he pressed his purple hands against my charcoal dress, and neither of us minded. My mother stood at the back door and watched. She did not say anything else. She didn't need to. The legal aftermath unfolded over the following 6 weeks in the way that legal aftermaths unfold, not dramatically, not all at once, but in a series of practical steps that collectively dismantled the architecture of the previous year and replaced it with something more honest, if considerably less comfortable. Hendricks and Pruitt filed a notice of withdrawal from the case 4 days after the hearing. Gloria did not retain new counsel. The 60-day window for appeal passed without action. Derek called me on the Thursday of the first week. He asked if we could meet somewhere neutral, not the house, not his office. I suggested the coffee shop on Ponce de Leon, where we'd gone on our 3rd date, which in retrospect was either sentimental or ironic, and was probably both. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at the same table we had sat at in 2017, with a coffee he was not drinking. He looked tired, in a way that was not about sleep. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. I will not record every word. Some of it belongs only to that table, to that afternoon, to the 2 of us navigating a shared history toward a conclusion that had been coming for longer than either of us had named. What I will say is that Derek was honest in a way I had not consistently experienced from him. He said he had told himself that supporting his mother did not mean opposing me, and that sitting in that courtroom had shown him in a way he could not undo that those 2 things had never been separable. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once, and the repetition felt genuine rather than procedural. I believed him. Believing him did not change the conclusion. We agreed to divorce in that coffee shop over cups neither of us finished on a Thursday afternoon in November, while the street outside moved through its ordinary business. It was not a hostile agreement. It was a clear one. Patricia and Derek's attorney, a man named Foster, who wore bow ties and was apparently very good, worked through the terms over the following 3 weeks. The custody arrangement was straightforward primary residence with me generous visitation for Derek. A schedule built around Marcus's daycare routine and Derek's work calendar. Derek did not contest anything Patricia proposed. He showed up to every meeting and he signed what needed signing. And he left each time without drama, which was, I understood, his version of penance. The asset division was resolved without litigation, which I had not been certain would happen. Derek knew about the trust he had always known about the trust, but the full accounting of what it contained was clarifying for him in the way that full accountings tend to be clarifying. He was not a bad man. He had made bad choices in the hierarchy of his loyalties, and those choices had cost him something real. He understood that now. Gloria went quiet. That was the word I kept coming back to in the weeks after the hearing. Quiet. Not silent, not gone, just quiet, in the way that a very loud thing goes quiet when it has lost its audience. The church calls stopped. Derek's Uncle Raymond did not call again. Barbara from the women's ministry did not call again. The network that Gloria had spent months activating simply deactivated the way networks do when the organizing energy at the center withdraws. I heard through Derek that Gloria had told a small number of people, a small version of what had happened, that the case had not gone as expected, that she was taking time, that she had some things to reflect on. I did not know if the reflection was real. I had spent enough time in Gloria's orbit to understand that her self-awareness and her self-presentation were not always the same thing. But I also understood that what had happened in that courtroom had shown her something about the limits of the story she had been telling, about the risks of walking into a room and believing that what you have hidden is hidden everywhere. The daughter in Savannah. I thought about her sometimes, wondered what her life looked like, wondered if she knew, wondered if she had spent 38 years with the particular gap that comes from being a person whose origin story was decided by a court before she was old enough to understand courts. I did not know her name. I did not search for her. That was not my story to enter. But I thought about her. Derek moved into an apartment in Decatur in the 3rd week of December. He took the furniture from the guest room, his desk, the standing lamp from the living room that I had never liked anyway, and the photograph from the hallway, the one from our wedding. The two of us under the oak trees at Piedmont Park, both of us squinting into the afternoon light. He asked if he could have it. I said yes. It was a good photograph. He should have it. The house felt different after he left. Not empty. Marcus filled it in the way that small, determined people fill spaces completely, and with great noise, but different. Rearranged. Like a room where the furniture has been shifted and you keep reaching for a lamp that is no longer in the corner and finding air. I received the keys to a new apartment on the first Friday of January. A 3-bedroom on the north side of Decatur, 2nd floor, good light. In the mornings, a small yard that backed up to a community garden. I had found it in November quietly before the hearing, before the divorce was filed, in the same spirit in which I had started the note on my phone and retained Patricia Osei, the spirit of a person who was no longer waiting to see how things would go, but was instead arranging for how they would go. It was raining the morning the keys were handed over. A light, steady January rain, the kind that cleans things without making a fuss about it. I stood on the front step with the keys in my hand, and I looked at the yard, and I thought about Marcus learning to walk in the grass there in the spring, thought about the community garden and whether he would like to put his hands in dirt. Thought about a small life being built in a small yard under good morning light. I went inside. I stood in the empty living room. I took off my grandmother's earrings. I had put them on that morning without deciding the same as the day of the hearing, and I held them in my palm for a moment. Then I put them back on. There was still work to do. Marcus learned to pump his legs on a real swing in March, not the invisible one from the daycare parking lot, a real one. The wooden swing set Derek and I had bought the previous spring. and that now lived in the small yard behind the Decatur apartment, slightly crooked on account of the ground being softer on the left side than the right. We had meant to fix it. I kept meaning to fix it. Marcus did not care about the crookedness. He cared about going higher. I sat on the back step with my coffee, and I watched him figure it out. It took most of a Saturday morning. Forward and back legs not quite synced with the motion, face knitted with the particular concentration of a person solving a problem that matters to them enormously and to no one else. He fell off twice. Both times he got back on. The second time he looked at me before he climbed back up, not for permission, not for reassurance, just to confirm I was still there. I was still there. He climbed back up. By noon, he had it. He pumped his legs and the swing went up, and he tipped his head back and he laughed at the sky. I held my coffee cup and I watched my son laugh at the sky, and I thought, this is what it was for. Not the courtroom, not the documents, not the 14 months of notes on my phone, or the exhibit appended to a legal filing, or the 3 words from a judge at 11:47 on a Wednesday morning. All of that had been infrastructure. This a crooked swing set and a child laughing at the sky on a Saturday in March. This was the thing the infrastructure had been protecting. I want to be careful about how I tell this part. I have heard a version of this story told as a story about winning, and I understand why. Because there was a proceeding, and there was an outcome, and in the most literal sense, one side won and one side did not. But I've been inside this story, and from the inside, it does not feel like winning. It feels like arriving. Like walking a very long way to a place you were always supposed to be, and finding it more ordinary and more sufficient than you had let yourself imagine. The apartment had become a home. In the way that homes become themselves gradually through use, through the accumulation of small particular details that belong to a specific life and no other. Marcus's rain boots by the front door, always left at a 45-degree angle to each other for reasons he could not explain. The crayon drawing on the refrigerator that he had described to me as a dog and also some weather, and that I had not had the heart to ask him to elaborate on. The specific sound the back door made when the temperature dropped, a low complaint from the hinges that I had scheduled to have fixed and then kept not fixing because it had become, without my permission, part of the sound of home. Derek came on Tuesdays and alternate weekends. He arrived on time consistently with the focused reliability I had first noticed about him in 2017, and that he was now applying belatedly to the correct things. He and Marcus had built their own routine Saturday morning pancakes at a diner on Commerce Drive. The specific podcast about dinosaurs they listened to in the car that Marcus required to be played in the same episode order every time a handshake they had invented together that took 45 seconds to complete, and that Marcus performed with the gravity of a diplomat. I watched them do the handshake in my front hallway one Tuesday evening. All 45 seconds of it, step by step, both of them counting under their breath. Marcus got to the final move, a double clap and a shoulder bump, and looked up at Derek with the full, uncomplicated love of a child who has decided someone is worth the whole handshake. Every step, no shortcuts. Derek looked back at him the same way. Whatever else had happened between us, that was real. That had always been real. I had said it in the coffee shop on Ponce de Leon, and I still believed it. Derek's love for Marcus was not something I had ever questioned. The problem had never been whether he loved our son. The problem had been what he had let stand between that love and his ability to protect it. He was working on that now. I could see it in the handshake in the Tuesday arrivals, in the way he no longer reached for his phone when Marcus was talking to him. People are capable of becoming more than they have been. I believe that. I have to believe it, raising a child who is at the beginning of his becoming and who will need his whole life to be in the presence of people who believe it. Gloria and I did not speak for 7 months after the hearing. In July, she called on a Sunday afternoon while Marcus was napping. I let it ring twice, and then I answered. She did not apologize, exactly. What she did was speak for 3 minutes in a careful, measured way about how much she loved Marcus and how she understood that things had gone in a direction she had not intended, and that she hoped in time there might be a path forward. Her voice was different than I had ever heard it, not soft exactly, but less armored. The performance quality had been taken out of it, and what was left was something more exposed and therefore paradoxically more trustworthy. I told her I was willing to consider supervised visits with Marcus in the future, structured and gradual with Derek present. I told her that what she built from this point forward would be built on honesty, or it would not be built at all. I told her Marcus deserved grandparents who were fully present and fully honest, and that I was not foreclosing the possibility that she could be that. She said, "Thank you." I said, "Don't thank me yet." We ended the call without warmth, but without hostility, which felt like the accurate temperature for where we were. Not forgiveness, I want to be precise about that, because forgiveness is a word people use to mean many different things, and I have found it more useful to be specific. I had released the weight of it. That is different from forgiving. Releasing the weight means you stop carrying the thing. It does not mean the thing didn't happen. Both are true simultaneously, and I have stopped trying to resolve the contradiction. What I know is this: the weight is not in my body anymore. I notice its absence. The way you notice the absence of a sound you had stopped registering. You didn't know how constant it was until the silence arrived and showed you. My grandfather drove the same bus route for 31 years. Southwest Atlanta, 5:47 a.m. to 2:15 p.m., 31 years without missing a scheduled shift. People asked him sometimes if it was boring, the same route every day, the same stops, the same faces. He said it was never the same route twice if you were paying attention. Same streets, different light. Same stops, different people. Same bus, different version of yourself sitting in that seat. I think about that a lot now. Same life mostly. Same coffee in the morning, same back step, same child on the same crooked swing. But a different version of the person sitting here, watching it. Lighter, more deliberate, clearer about what the infrastructure is for and what it has been protecting all along. Marcus pumped his legs, and the swing went up, and he called out. Mama looked the way he always did, the way he had been doing since he first learned that Mama was a word, and that I was the person it pointed to. I looked. I was always going to look. He called me Mama and reached for his juice, and the morning went on the way. Mornings do, ordinary, sufficient, entirely enough. That was enough. That was always going to be enough. If you have stayed until this moment, you already know what this story is really about. It is not about a courtroom. Courtrooms are just rooms where the truth, if you have protected it carefully enough, finally gets to be loud. This story is about documentation. About paying attention when something feels wrong even before you have language for what is wrong. About the note you start on your phone on a Tuesday night after a pediatric appointment, not knowing yet what it will become. It is about the particular steadiness required to not react when reaction is what the other side needs from you. It is about the daughter in Savannah who has been in a sealed file for 38 years, and about how the things we bury do not stay buried. They wait patient as stone for the moment when someone finally looks in the right place. And it is about a swing set crooked on the left side in a small yard with good morning light. Build the documentation. Trust the stillness. Protect the yard. The rest will follow.